let me introduce you guys to our very first speaker. He's our keynote speaker. His name is Gabriel Velazquez. So Gabriel is a senior generative AI solutions architect at AWS. He currently focuses on supporting Anthropic on the go-to-market strategy. Prior to working with AI, Gabriel built deep expertise in the telecom industry, where he supported the launch of Canada's first 4G network. He now combines his expertise in interconnecting Canada with his knowledge of generative AI to help customers innovate at scale. Please help me welcome Gabriel.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Hi, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm excited to get to share a bit of time with this audience and to be part of the community day. And my talk today is about Anthropic. We're going to cover how to get access to this model, a service called Amazon Bedrock. And this is what we consider an introductory session. So in Amazon terms, we call this a level 100, a level 200 presentation, meaning that we don't assume any pre-existing knowledge. Therefore, if you do happen to have any questions that aren't addressed during the presentation, then use the QR code and submit them, and we'll try to carve out a little bit of time during Q&A. So, like you heard, my name is Gabriel. I'm a senior generative AI solutions architect, and what this really means is that I work with Anthropic on a daily basis. I sit with them during their model launches. We talk about feature development, and we discuss how to roll out some of the production use cases with our largest customers. And in order for you to understand how to leverage a large language model like Anthropic's Claude, you have to have a little base understanding of the Amazon Bedrock service. So I'll spend a few minutes just talking about what is Amazon Bedrock. If you haven't tried it, I'll encourage you to give it a go. We'll then do a flyby of Anthropic as a company, talk about the vision, talk about how they're accelerating with AI. I'll do a flyby of the Claude tree model family, and then I'll highlight some key features that you should start thinking about as you build out applications using these models. The way that Amazon and AWS approaches generative AI is we realize that there's no one journey for every single customer and every single user. And so we've built out a stack. Show of hands, just out of curiosity, who here has trained even a very small AI model or large language model before? So we've got a few people in the room. Awesome. So typically, you'll be using services like our SageMaker service or our managed infrastructure because you're looking to get the most bang for your buck, the most performance out of the model. And so this is where companies like Anthropic operate. They operate at the bottom of the stack at that infrastructure layer. A lot of users actually don't want to train a model. They simply just want to be able to consume it. They want to use an API. They want to build a generative AI application. And that's what we made the Amazon Bedrock service for. It's a fully managed service that gives you access to the models without you having to worry about the underlying infrastructure. And in the other talks you'll hear today as well about the third level, which is if you don't even want to worry about building AI into your application, then you can use services like Amazon Q for Business, Amazon Q Code Whisperer, that allow you to tap into the power of generative AI using your data without having to create any custom application. So really, what is Amazon Bedrock? Well, Amazon Bedrock is a fully managed service that gives you access to model choice. We curate some of the best models from companies like Anthropic, like Cohere, Stability AI, AI21, and Amazon's own foundation models. And we provide you access through a single API. So with a single API, you get access to the variety of models. And we give you a set of capabilities that allow you to customize how you interact with these models. So typically, when you're trying to build a generative AI application, you're looking to augment it with your data. One way to do this would be through a technique called retrieval augmented generation, or RAG. And so we've got a native service called Amazon Knowledge Bases that plugs in, that allows you to upload a PDF or upload a database and use that as you ask questions of this large language model so that you can ground it in truth. You have certain customers that prefer to custom fine-tune a model. You essentially want to take a copy of the model, you want to train it against your data set, and so we provide out-of-the-box capabilities to fine-tune models. as well as more recently, we're hearing our customers ask for the ability to create agentic workflows. And agentic workflows, really what it means is you get a large language model and you ask it questions in the hope that you break it down into steps and tasks. And so that orchestration of these tasks is all supported directly on Amazon Bedrock. The last thing to note is that Amazon Bedrock has security at heart. So all the data that you're using to interact with these models is not used to train the model. We don't keep a copy of this information. So we put security and governance at the heart of the service. And we also provide features like something similar to guardrails, where if you'd like to restrict the output of the model based on content type or certain different types of classifications, that's also natively supported directly on Bedrock. So that's it for Bedrock. We'll talk a little bit about Anthropic itself. You may have not heard of Anthropic. You've probably heard of OpenAI. And so it's fitting to kind of introduce the Anthropic team, the people that developed this model. So Anthropic, if you're not familiar with them, they are one of the leading AI companies for large language models today. The team that you're seeing behind me is the founding team. So these were all AI researchers that worked at OpenAI, and they left to start Anthropic. They're mostly known for their work around a paper called the Large Language Models Are Few-Shot Learners. So this is colloquially known as the GPT-3 paper. They left OpenAI to start Anthropic because they wanted to focus specifically on large language models and specifically on understanding the mind of a model. So how do you interpret it? Because if you sit long enough with Anthropic, you'll understand that they're pushing the capabilities of these models further. And so as you push the capabilities of these models further, we're looking to get a better sense and understanding that they're safe, that they're aligned, and that we understand what's happening behind every output that the model gives you. Anthropic is moving at a really fast pace. So their first model that they launched last year was Claude 2. When they launched it, it still did not perform as good as the OpenAI models, as the leading models in the industry. This year, they launched 2 models. They launched the Claude 3 Opus model, which quickly became, for a brief period of time, one of the best performing models in the industry. And then quickly after, in June, they launched another revised version called Claude 3.5 Sonnet, which also kind of broke the industry benchmarks once again. So they're moving at a really fast pace. One of the things that's important to note about Anthropic is as they move towards releasing these models and increasing capabilities, they put safety and an understanding of what is the output of the model at the core through a process called constitutional AI. For those who've never trained a model before, you'll have to note that when you're training a model, there's a process called reinforcement learning with human feedback, which is very time-consuming and very difficult to do as these models get bigger and bigger, because we're dealing with larger and larger data sets. It requires a lot of people to annotate. It requires a lot of people to provide input. Was this accurate? Was this not? Was this truthful? Was this not? Was this harmful? Was this not? And the way that Anthropic deals with this issue is they've developed a set of constitutions based on the UN Charter of Human Rights and working with experts in ethics. And they codified this constitution and trained a smaller model that essentially does the feedback during the training process, rather than having to leverage a very large pool of human annotators to provide that feedback. What this does is it allows them to provide a very consistent experience during the training cycle. It removes a lot of bias, and it helps you scale, because again, these models are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. I'll give you a quick overview of how quickly things are moving, just for you to get a sense of the pace of the industry. So Claude 2 was the first model that Anthropic launched on Amazon Bedrock. This was launched in August of last year. 3 months after that, they launched Claude 2.1, introducing the first model in its class that had a 200,000 context window. A context window, effectively, you can think of it as the memory, how much information you can pass to the model when you're asking it a question. So this context window was about 6 times larger than the next leading model at the time. 3 months after that, in March, they launched the Claude 3 family, and they introduced the notion of multimodality, of vision. Effectively, it gives the models the ability to take a look at an image and interpret what's on the image, extract insights and information. 3 months after that, we released Claude 3.5 Sonnet. And what this did is that it brought the cost of the most performant model, so the smartest model of the family, it brought the cost down by 80%. So I put this slide here for you to consider the trend that you're seeing on screen right now. The first is that we're seeing Anthropic release models every 90 to 120 days. So it's very fast. They're getting better. And the price is going down. Really, what you need to think about this is, as you explore with a large language model, don't constrain yourself to what's possible today, particularly on cost. You should be assuming that these models are getting more performant, more capable, and that the cost to run these models will continue to decrease as we improve the algorithms, as we improve the infrastructure to run these models. We will see continued improvements in that direction. I talked a lot about models, and for some of you, it may not be clear. Like I said, I talked about different versions of models. So this chart should give you a much better view of how we break down the models. It's quite simple. We have a small model called Claude Haiku. This is the smallest, fastest, most performant, most cost-effective model of the family. In the middle, we have Claude 3 Sonnet. This is a balance of performance, intelligence, cost. And we have Claude Opus, which is the smartest model of the family, the most capable one, the one that you want to leverage when you have very difficult reasoning questions or difficult use case that you're looking to solve. What's interesting from this chart, as you can see, is that when Anthropic released the 3.5 version, so the upgraded version of Sonnet, we essentially have a model that's just as capable, if not slightly more, than Opus at a fraction of the price. Anthropics already stated that they plan to release the 3.5 versions of Haiku and of Opus later this year. And so those are some of the models that we are looking forward to. And you can follow the same concept of small, medium, large. Next question when I show this slide to most of my customers is, okay, which model should I start with? And the answer is actually pretty simple. Whether you're evaluating Anthropic or whether you're evaluating a different large language model, my strong recommendation is to always start with Claude 3.5 Sonnet. This is simply just so that you can prove out whatever use case you're trying to solve, whatever problem you're trying to solve, can you get it to work? If you can get it to work with Claude 3.5 Sonnet, then you can start optimizing for cost and performance elsewhere. So you start with Claude 3.5 Sonnet first. It's the model that has the most capability in terms of vision accuracy, so giving it images and reasoning over the images. It's the model that we see most developers use to generate code. So we have a lot of developers that what they do is they leverage that extended long context window, that 200,000 tokens that I talked about, put in a database of code and ask the model to iterate, help it create documentation, help it create test units, or even help it refactor code. Claude 3.5 Sonnet outperforms the other models when you look at it from a benchmarking from industry perspective. So what you're seeing right now is a snapshot from the model card. If you're not familiar with a model card, every time you're looking at a large language model, it's probably a good practice for you to go and download that. Every AI company provides that. It gives you a little bit more insights into the model. And you can see that Claude 3.5 Sonnet, compared to the rest of the model family, outperforms in dimensions around medicine, questions around law, coding, and so on. The main takeaway that comes from here when you're looking at this slide is essentially, why would I ever use Claude Haiku if Claude 3.5 Sonnet is so performant? And it really comes down to cost and performance. So is there a way to get Claude Haiku to perform as well as a smarter, larger model? And the answer is yes. And there's a few techniques that you can do to get to that point. You can combine something called prompt engineering, which is structuring your output and your question to the model. You can add retrieval augmented generation, which is you augment the model's knowledge by providing a set of data that it asks and queries against before giving you an answer. And you can do something called fine-tuning, which we'll cover in a second, which provides you the ability to retrain the model with your own data. By doing this, effectively what you're doing is you're lowering your overall application cost, because Haiku costs a fraction of what larger models cost. And also from a latency perspective, most enterprises that I speak to are very latency sensitive. You know, when you ask a question, you don't want your user to be waiting around multiple seconds to get an answer. And so this is another reason why you're looking for that fast latency. Claude Haiku is very good at data extraction, so you can give it a task where it has to extract data. It's very good at summarization, so you don't need a much more capable model for that. Translation, we see it a lot in content moderation. So if you're looking for a very simple, fast way to build a content moderation system, for example, I have a lot of companies that have that want to provide the ability to generate AI images, but perhaps you would like for the input of your users to be filtered. If there were certain brands, users, or type of content that you don't want the image model to generate, you can intercept that query. You can get Claude Haiku to classify that quite quickly and easily. All right. So in order to leverage Claude Haiku to its full potential, in order to really get it to perform at the same level as Claude 3.5 Sonnet, you have to use your own data. And in order to do this, we have a process called fine-tuning. Fine-tuning is currently available in preview on Amazon Bedrock. It should be made generally available very, very shortly. And effectively what this does is it allows you to take a copy of the model and augment its training. You basically take a copy of Claude Haiku, you take a set of data, corporate data set, manuals, proprietary information, you train the model against it, and then you're now able to ask the model to provide answers based on your data. And you do this again to lower cost, to lower performance, to increase performance, I should say, and with the intent of always ensuring that the copy of the model and the copy of your data remain privately held and encrypted in a secure manner. Some of the key features that I'd like to highlight for you when you're looking at a model like Claude is, first is accuracy. And when we mean by accuracy, you've probably heard the term hallucinations. So how do we minimize incorrect answers effectively? One way to do this is you start creating a data set of questions where you know the model is weak at answering. And you try to classify them as, did it answer the question correctly, incorrectly, did it make something up, did it hallucinate, or did it admit that it did not have the knowledge for it? You can see that the models are improving over time. Claude 3.5 Sonnet continues this trend of reducing hallucinations or increasing accuracy. And another way to look at accuracy is actually to do evaluations. So there's a very famous and well-known industry evaluation called the needle in a haystack evaluation. And so what this graph is showing you essentially is if you're trying to retrieve the right information from a very, very large set of text, so this 200 context window, imagine 500 pages of very technical AWS documentation. And I want to make sure that it's retrieving facts from this documentation, that it's not making it up. So my favorite needle to hide in this test is the best thing to do in Vancouver is to wear a raincoat while drinking Tim Hortons double-doubles and complaining about home pricings on the C-bus. So completely, if you're from Vancouver, completely relatable sentence, not something you would find in AWS documentation. And you hide this needle, and then you test against the model, and you ask it, what's the best thing to do in Vancouver? And you ask it a bunch of times at different lengths in the hopes to see, does it retrieve that needle? Does it retrieve the right information? From a statistical perspective, what you can see is Claude 3.5 Sonnet maintains a near perfect 100% accuracy recall over the entire length of the context. So as you increase the amount of data, it's still able to accurately recall that information, whereas other models from previous generations start struggling around that 20,000 to 100,000 context window. Another thing that you want to consider with these models is the model's vision capabilities. And so it's really important because one thing that we know is that there's a lot of enterprise data that is not available in text form. That's available in images. So whether it's PDFs, whether it's charts, whether it's slides, you want to be able to access this data. And one way to do this is to provide those images to the model to extract those insights and information. So practically, in practice, what does this look like? How do we pull that information together? It's actually pretty straightforward. You can create a prompt such as, hey, I have an image of a shoe. I'd like you to write out a very detailed schema about this shoe. You can actually give it the schema and say, here's the format that I want you to answer. And then the model provides an output. And in this case, it was accurately able to report the brand, the colors, the materials, and so on. You're also able to augment this with multiple images. So one way to tackle this would be to provide 2 images and say, could you compare these 2 images and provide the output in a table or in a schema format? You can also actually provide multiple examples. You can provide multiple images to the model and say, here are examples of box in good condition, medium condition, bad condition. And then based on these examples, you would provide it a new image and say, rank the quality of the box based on the examples that I provided. The last superpower that I want you to be aware of with Claude is that Claude really gets supercharged when you give it access to external APIs, when you give it access to tools. The ability to interact with tools essentially allows the model to interact with external databases, query third-party APIs. It really just extends the capability of what the model can do. This is the foundation when you start hearing about models doing agentic workflows. It's leveraging this capability. So in practice, what does this really look like? Well, you start by giving a prompt. So a simple question like, for example, I have an application. I'd like to know what the weather is. I'm chatting with Claude, and I would say, what's the weather in Vancouver? And then I would give Claude, in the prompt, a list of functions. I would say, you as a model have access to, for example, 2 functions. You can go get the weather, and here's the schema of the API for getting the weather. You can go retrieve the top songs for today's top charts, and you provide a description of the tool. And then at step number 2, what Claude does is it reads this and it makes a decision based on what you've provided, which tool should it use in order to extract the relevant information. Claude will respond and say, obviously, if you're asking for the weather in Vancouver, I need to use the weather tool, and I need to extract the city and province. It then returns that value back to you at the application for your client to be able to issue an actual API call. So the model is never the one sending the API call. It still is your application that does this. You retrieve the answer. You pass the answer back to Claude. And because you told Claude, you can see the parameters of temperature, rain, and possibility of cloud, then Claude is able to provide an answer and say, hey, the weather right now in Vancouver is around 14 degrees, cloudy, with a potential mix of showers. To end today's presentation, I wanted to leave you with a chart just so that you have a really high-level overview of the different models of the Claude family. I do encourage you to try out Claude 3.5 Sonnet first. Every single model of the Claude family has vision capability. Every single model of the Claude family has a 200,000 context window. You can see that by far, Claude Haiku is the most competitively priced model. If you are new to generative AI, and a lot of what I showed to you today is a little bit outside of your comfort zone, what I'll encourage you to try is a free application called Party Rock. Party Rock is free. You just need an Amazon or a Google account. And it allows you in no code, click and drop, play around with foundation models like Anthropic and all the other models that Amazon Bedrock provides. You don't need to spend you don't need to put a credit card. You can just get started. We have templates of applications that you can go out and try. And this will give you a really good feel for models and building generative AI applications. If, however, you are a current builder, if you'd like to go into a little bit more depth, then these are the resources that you'll want to leverage. And the one that I'll recommend the most is at the bottom. It's our prompt engineering workshop. The prompt engineering workshop is something that we run as solutions architects with our customers. So if you are a customer of AWS and you'd like to run through this workshop, contact your solutions architect. If you're interested in AWS hosting a community prompt engineering workshop, then let Matt and the team know, and it will be our pleasure to organize that for you as well. And if you prefer to just run through this workshop by yourself, it's fully available. You can just run through the notebooks, and it gives you everything that you need to really feel comfortable in operating with a large language model like Claude. And I think I'm near my time. So with that, I think I've got a few minutes left, and we can move on to Q&A.
Thank you, Gabriel. We have a couple of minutes for questions. For those, if your tool, if your tool, when it's asked what the weather is in Vancouver and it doesn't say rainy, you need to check your LLM, I think, a little bit. So kind of a narrow use case for that. So yeah, we have a couple of questions here for Gabriel. Thanks for jumping on. Mentimeter.
Cool. All right. So we do have a question from the audience, and that is how to use services like Claude or OpenAI to train a small, large language model for niche markets.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think the first thing you'd want to look at is the terms and conditions from the provider. If you can leverage a model to do something called distillation, which is what you're asking for. So using a larger model as a teacher for a smaller model. So first thing that I'll say is look at the terms and conditions for that. Specifically for Claude, it is something that we're looking to enable on Amazon Bedrock.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, please give a hand to Gabriel.
Thank you.